So the big news is that we are not going to get 10-minute deliveries anymore. And I dare say that's a happy outcome of the flash strikes that gig workers went on in December. Now, this issue, this confrontation between gig workers and platforms that enable gig work is not new. It's an old one and it has happened across the world. But this particular issue, perhaps because of some of the statements or public reactions put out by Deepinder Goyal, who is the founder of Zomato and a bunch of other startups, and is also one of the poster boys for the startup economy in India, has led to a bigger debate about structural themes, underlying themes of capitalism, labor rights, inequality, and how India's economy has functioned post liberalization and how capitalism has worked in a country like India. Now, one of the most thoughtful pieces about this debate was written by Santosh Desai, who, as you know, is a popular columnist and a cultural anthropologist in the way he deals with stuff that he's writing. He's, of course, also a brand expert and the founder of Think Nine Communications, as well as the CEO of Future Brands. Santosh, a lot to talk about, but the first thing, good news, strikes work, is it? 10-minute delivery rolled back.
Yeah, well, I think it's good news, but it's also I'm a little skeptical about what exactly it means. Because you can stop claiming 10 minutes, but does it mean that you will actually stop delivering in 10 minutes? Meaning, and because the business model depends on quick commerce, and so while 10 minute as a claim may not be made publicly, I'm not exactly sure what this translates into just yet.
I was reading news reports that this is not a regulation or a ban. It's a kind of undertaking or an informal assurance given by these quick commerce and delivery platforms to the labor ministry in the union government. I want you to help us understand this 10-minute fixation. So, is this an advertising and marketing claim, or is this about business and unit economics for these business models?
Well, I think it started out as a way for one brand to differentiate itself from the others,
Mm, mm.
to say that we'll deliver to you in 10 minutes. I mean, in a more conventional setting, Domino's Pizzas did that
Yeah.
as a brand, where they said, we'll deliver to you, and if money back if we don't.
But Santosh,
So,
there it was, a pizza has to be eaten hot, otherwise it's no good,
so,
right? And so that
no,
was
but
a,
so it may have been a logic, but I'm just
yeah.
saying even there it came out of differentiation. It came out
Mm,
of the fact that this is what will differentiate my brand from the others.
mm,
So I don't think there was a consumer need
mm,
that was being addressed. I mean, this is a consumer need that has got created.
mm,
And initially it was just therefore somebody saying that, okay, I'll do it faster.
mm.
And so that became an advantage. And over a period of time, we got used to it. As consumers, we got used to the fact, oh, I can get it in 10 minutes. If I can get it in 10 minutes instead of getting it in tomorrow, why not?
Mm,
So I mean, it's one of those things where you don't need it,
mm.
but if it comes to you, you know better. I mean, it's you're not going to complain that you've delivered it to me early. And then you get into the habit of then deciding something at the last minute, and getting. So in that sense, this was never a consumer need.
Mm,
I think that's the key. I mean, it was never a consumer prompted
mm,
response by business. Business saw it fit for its own purposes
mm.
to do this.
Can you
And
explain that a bit more? Like, what is it about that quick turnaround that these platforms are so keen on? Because to quote Dipinder Goyal, there's no timer that's counting down, which the delivery partner or rider has to keep an eye on. And yet, all the delivery riders claim that this is a huge mental and physical stress and pressure point.
look, I mean, that if you don't have a counter, but you say that your bonus is linked to how many deliveries you do in a day, it effectively is the same thing, right? I mean,
Mm,
so you don't have to have a counter
sure.
if your incentive system is built in a way which rewards quick deliveries, and that quick delivery calculation is done on the basis of a really short period of time. That's how you say, no, not 20, but you do 30 deliveries a day. That can only be done if you deliver
Yeah.
in 10 minutes. So I mean, to me, that's not a meaningful difference, really. I mean, I think the heart of the matter is this. To
Hmm.
me, the heart of the matter is this: to claim that this is something that is a necessity from consumers is not true. It is not a necessity.
Okay.
Consumers have not asked for it.
Hmm.
Business saw it for its own advantage. And one business did, others followed suit.
Hmm.
Over a period of time, consumers got trained to expect it early,
Hmm.
so it became an industry and a category. And then the pressure shifted to the delivery worker,
Hmm.
who then has to fulfill something which was never a need. I mean, so in that sense,
Hmm.
it is something. It is one of those things that has got created entirely because of the fact that businesses thought it advantageous, and it's not a consumer proposition in that sense. Now it's a different story because now all of us have got used to 10 minutes. So so now consumers would prefer to have it early rather than late. So it's one of those things that has become a need, which but was never one.
So, but isn't that what good business and good marketing is about? If I were to play devil's advocate, I was reading Andy Mukherjee, the Bloomberg columnist, piece on this matter, and he says very interestingly that the home delivery, etc., got accelerated and became a phenomenon during the pandemic. And this quick delivery also was a feature of the pandemic. But in countries like the US, post pandemic and the resumption of normal shopping habits and patterns, this thing faded out, this quick delivery. Whereas in India, it has become quicker and quicker and quicker, as we've seen.
So that's largely on account of cheap labor. I mean, that's a fundamental difference. The reason why India can afford to do this, and India
Yeah.
businesses can afford to do this,
Hmm.
not that they are making money. I
Hmm.
mean, when you say afford to do this, I don't mean to suggest that this is a profitable model.
Sure.
But the fact that you can do it at all is because of the fact that there's cheap labor. So it's on the back of cheap labor. There is no other factor.
Hmm.
There is no, there is no other economic factor that is responsible for the fact that India can do this while other countries cannot, but for the fact of cheap labor. See, for instance, other variables like real estate costs in India are extremely high,
Hmm.
given India's market size.
Yeah.
It's not as if founders take any less money or are not billionaires.
Yeah.
It is not as if investors expect lower returns in
Yeah.
India. So none of the other variables are supporting the 10-minute delivery. Only the fact that labor is cheap in India is what is supporting this.
You said very clearly that this is a habit, this is not a need, it's a habit that was created and now we've got used to it. What is there anything about us, about Indians, and you have been minutely looking at Indian behavior culturally. Why have we taken to it and want more of it?
Well, I honestly don't know if this is a cultural thing. I honestly
Hmm.
think it is simply, you
Hmm.
know, more is better than less,
Hmm.
cheaper is better than more expensive,
Yeah.
faster is better than slower. I mean, there are
Yeah.
some essential sort of truths in life,
Hmm.
and I think this is one of those where what we are losing nothing and gaining something in return. I
Hmm.
mean, why is it not a good deal from any perspective? And we understand value. I mean, that certainly we do.
Hmm.
So this is better value if you can get something faster rather than slower for the same price.
Hmm.
If I'm not paying for it significantly, and I'm getting it faster, why not? Also, it allows for impulse. It allows for us to be less planned,
Hmm.
because so in that sense it all human characteristics that we would love to lapse into but are
Jugaad.
forced to.
Jugaad was a very popular favorite word of the Indian way of doing things, isn't it?
Yeah, it's like
Last minute.
the idea that it
Yeah.
makes us lazier, it makes us have to plan for less. Why
Hmm.
not? I mean, that's always a good idea.
There's a lot of argument and people ranged on all sides of this debate, but the way you address some of the issues I thought was very, very illuminating. It really helped shed light on this matter and not more noise. One of the things you say, and I'm quoting you, what makes platform work revealing is that the business model rests on labor, not labor as a cost line, but labor as the pivotal resource. The product being sold is not software, the product is human movement through physical reality. You go on further to say the work may be low credential, but it is high friction and deeply valuable. This is an idea that needs to sink in. A low skills job can be the source of great value. I think this argument you make is going to shake up a lot of people, isn't it? Because the you're reframing the way digital tech platforms offer work.
I mean, if I was to just step back a little and say that when technology changes,
Hmm.
right, then what element of labor becomes valuable changes.
Yeah.
Just like AI is making our mental analytical work less valuable because now it can replace you.
Yeah.
So I think just as all these platforms talk a lot about change that technology brings about,
Hmm.
but then they must acknowledge the fact that along with the change of technology, labor doing what we previously called low skill work
Hmm.
has now become highly important work,
Hmm.
and therefore its value needs to be reconstituted,
Hmm.
renegotiated, because in an older world that was low value work.
Yeah.
In today's technological reality, today's technological reality, it is not low value work.
Hmm.
So you must ascribe higher value to it because the world has changed,
Hmm.
because this is something that technology today cannot replace. The fact that you go into an urban, jungle like ours,
Mm.
where addresses are weird and vague, and where there are no lifts half the time. There is no technological system
Mm.
that can replace human labor.
And airdrops by drones is not something that is taken off in India. Yeah.
Yeah, and also, for that to work, I mean, for even then, the last mile connectivity, even there, the last mile connectivity is human, right?
Mm.
Drones can
Mm.
take you to a central point. You
Mm.
can't have drone delivery in an apartment, or a set of flats, third floor.
Yeah.
You can't have 14B by 2, drone delivery. That is, and if it comes to apartment, it won't come back. The
Mm.
drone won't come back. I mean, I mean, we are not. So the drone system in India is a
Mm.
long way from
Mm.
coming, right?
Mm.
So as of now,
Mm.
this is irreplaceable.
Mm.
As of now, this is irreplaceable, extremely valuable, and therefore it must be recognized that value must be. I mean, business always says we'll place value where there is value. Today, your argument is that there is low value because there is low skill.
Mm.
But that argument is actually outdated, because low skill in an earlier context,
Mm.
low skill in an earlier context was low value. Today, it is not. It is higher value because your
I
entire business rests on it.
I think this is perhaps like the key thing that you've reframed via this piece that you've written. Let me go to another thing, and that is you talk while you make this case for workers and how to value work and labor in this gig economy setup. You also say something very interesting, and that is you say that these demands of the gig workers are legitimate, but you say, and I'm quoting you now, it is important for workers to speak inside the same ideological model that business uses, not because appealing to rights is wrong, because more but because moral appeal without mechanism is easy to applaud and easy to ignore. What did you really mean by this?
I think the normal, debate and the narrative comes from two different ideological positions and systems. There is a business system and there is a rights framework.
Yeah.
Right? The rights framework is that there must be dignity of labor. And there is a well-developed argument for that. Typically, these arguments talk at cross purposes.
And are seen as zero sum games, right?
Yeah, they cancel each other out, and more importantly, they stop talking to each other.
Hmm.
They stop acknowledging each other's position or worldview as fundamentally legitimate. So when that doesn't happen, then what happens is then the more powerful wins.
Hmm.
And not just in terms of power has always rested with
Hmm.
money and capital, but
Yeah.
even in narrative terms,
Hmm.
the power has moved to capital.
Hmm.
In an earlier time, in narrative terms,
Hmm.
power was better distributed, was more symmetrically distributed between capital and rights, the rights framework.
Yeah.
Today, the rights framework across the world,
Hmm.
is has does not have the power that it once did.
Hmm.
And so therefore, for people who argue for labor,
Hmm.
or for the proper value to be ascribed to labor,
Hmm.
I think would be better served if they could argue within the logic of business. And it's a strong argument. And the argument that, for instance, I was making was the fact that labor is doing exactly what business does.
Yeah.
The two principles of aggregation and leverage.
Hmm.
All platforms are based on that. Zomato and Swiggy provide no value of their own.
Hmm.
They get value because they aggregate consumers and they aggregate demand. They
Yeah.
squeeze restaurants on one hand.
Hmm. Hmm.
No restaurant is happy about having to part with the kind of money that they have to pay to the.
My favorite Chinese restaurant wants to do his own delivery.
Yeah, exactly.
He prefers that.
Exactly. Because nobody wants to part with that kind of money, but they have no choice.
Hmm.
So you squeeze
Hmm.
every other kind of stakeholder in order to, so you're doing exactly that. They're doing exactly that. They are organizing,
Hmm.
aggregating, and they're using leverage by doing it on 31st December.
Hmm.
So so it is not an anti-market. So that is not an anti-market argument. And the early argument that we were talking about, which is the fact that you need to now
Value.
redefine
Yeah.
value. You
Yeah.
need to redefine value in today's circumstances.
Yeah.
Both of them are arguments within the market system.
Hmm.
They are not arguments saying human labor must be valuable, dignity of work is important. They need to. It is not that those arguments are not valid.
I understand.
They, but the fact is that what is more effective today
Hmm.
in today's context, what is an argument that sits within
Hmm.
the argument that capital makes. And I think these are arguments that sit within that framework,
Hmm.
and therefore I think might be more difficult to challenge than conventional rights-based arguments.
That's very interesting. And also interesting is that, the larger debate this has engendered, we saw pretty well, people arranged on both sides, and there's more to it than just this gig workers issue, right? It is
Right.
about an outlook. And one of the words going around, I think it was Sanjeev Bikhchandani, I think Sanjeev put it out, champagne socialist. So you need to say you're not a champagne drinking socialist, aren't you?
I
Because if
hate
you
champagne.
are, then you're doing the right
I certainly,
approach,
I
and
would
that
be, it
has
would
been
be,
discredited today.
yeah, no, I mean, it would be, fun for me to be a socialist. I mean, having lived all my life in advertising, etc.
Exactly.
But
Yeah.
yeah, no, but I, and I understand. See, that's it's so easy to discredit that in today.
Yeah.
Champagne socialist is such an, narratively speaking, is a very powerful frame,
Yeah.
right? It is very easy to nod your head and say, yeah, exactly. I mean, people who are sitting on the periphery, who have no stakes, who have no, skin in the game, to use business language, find it easy to pontificate about stuff like this. But I think uh, arguments that do not come from that frame are not that easy to dismiss.
What are the kind of reactions you've got to this piece, given the world that you inhabit?
No, by and large, I have to say good reactions. By and large, I think it's something that people are ready to kind of engage with.
Hmm.
Uh, of course, few which are you know the whole, you don't know how much employment. It's very easy to sit from the outside, but the pain that these platforms
Yeah.
go through, and the
Yeah.
level of employment that they generate,
Yeah.
that kind of stuff, which I mean, it's not difficult to understand
Hmm. Hmm.
that kind of a reaction.
Hmm. Let's go to another, and I think the biggest, like one larger thought that you leave us with, and which is, and I'm quoting you now. You say capital is framed as creative and risk bearing, and therefore its claims on surplus are treated as legitimate ambition. Labor is framed as an input, therefore its claims are costs that must be contained. You go further on to say that the interesting question is why viability is deployed so selectively. Other market variables are treated as givens. Investor appetite for 100x returns is treated as background weather. Discounting becomes investment in growth. Marketing burn becomes brand building. Price wars are competition. Only labor compensation is framed as the fragile variable that might break the system. This is really, perhaps the final takeaway in this piece, Santosh. Just amplify that a bit.
I mean, that's what, it just feels strange to me that, here we are
Yeah.
in a system where, I mean, ridiculous returns
Yeah.
have been forthcoming, and where they bear no relationship to reality. You talk to some legacy
Hmm.
businessman, or a business person
Yeah.
who has slogged, over decades to build a value of a certain kind, and then you have a Johnny come lately startup, and by actually having no assets, nothing really,
Mhm.
nothing of their own,
Mm.
create value that leaves them,
Yeah.
grasping, because there is, that's the order of the day. So we accept the fact that everybody is entitled to vastly disproportionate
Yeah.
returns, right? Investors are entitled to it, founders are entitled to it,
Mm.
employees in their ESOPs
Mm.
are, change jobs on the basis of
Yeah.
that. Consumers get freebies
Yeah.
and get, stuff that actually the business cannot afford,
Mm.
because so they get the advantage. The only
Mm.
constituency
Mm.
that does not get advantage is simply because of power equations, because of the fact that because we are,
Mm.
labor is in such dire need
Mm.
of any form of employment, even if it is this, and by, Dipinder's own argument,
Mm.
the average
Income,
worker
monthly income. Yeah.
works 38 days in a year.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. So, I mean, this is not employment. So, I mean, so again, you can't have it both ways. You can't argue that we are generating employment
Mm.
and then also, talk about the fact that actually
They're
this is
not
gig work.
employees. Yeah.
They're not employees. So you can't have it both ways, right? And so to my mind, it just feels like fundamentally this is a dishonest argument. It
Mm.
is a dishonest argument,
Mm.
because why we don't say, okay, instead of 100x, why don't investors, make do with 3x?
Yeah.
Or why should the founders be billionaires? Why can't they be just very large multi-millionaires? I mean, we don't
So,
ask that question, right?
Santosh, you are treading very tricky ground for you. Okay, I have no problems with these arguments you're making, but you are in great danger of now being called a champagne drinking socialist.
Yeah, I know,
No,
I know.
because you see, look at the way I've worked with CNBC, you worked in advertising, and look at how everything is framed in how much you've grown, what the profit margin is. If the profit margin has fallen, not loss making, if the profit margin is down, and therefore what the share is doing or the stock price is doing. So all of the benchmarks like you talk about are really looked at through the lens of people who own capital and who own media, isn't it? Therefore,
Sure. No, but I understand that. But I'm just saying that let's look at it even just through that frame.
hmm,
Why do we draw a distinction between employees and labor?
hmm,
Right. I mean, employees, the fact that when employees want more, nobody says
yeah,
it's unfair.
hmm,
Nobody says that this is, anti-capital. No,
hmm,
nobody says that you're a champagne socialist
hmm,
if you argue that your
hmm,
employees should get more ESOPs.
hmm,
Right. It's for, if I was right now making an argument about employees and
hmm,
saying, founders must share more of their wealth with their employees because, the team is important, nobody
yeah,
would accuse me of being a champagne socialist, right?
right.
But the moment I say that, with respect to workers who are, just another grade of resource, human resource that you use, why does that argument shift? Right. So
Why
to
why
me,
why does it shift? Why does it shift?
because we
What
have
is
framed
your
them as different, because exactly because we have framed labor as input and
hmm,
employee as resource.
hmm,
Labor is input like raw material.
hmm,
We think of labor, we call it human, but we
hmm,
treat it as if it were it were a non-human input.
hmm,
Which is the reason why it is, whereas we do. And also it's about the fact that we think of the value provided by labor as being replaceable,
hmm,
as being, not therefore valuable, fundamentally valuable. So we have this hierarchy of what is valuable
yeah.
in terms of human input, and in
So
that hierarchy labor features low. And so, like I said, in a it was justifiable perhaps in a context where it was pure, the business system was such that the value that the labor was providing was actually low.
hmm,
But this, in this business system, the value that labor is providing is not low. So which is the reason why this is not a champagne socialist argument. This is a capitalist argument to say that please pay,
hmm,
where value resides.
hmm, hmm.
Please attribute, what you pay, and let it be aligned to where value resides. And here value resides with labor.
Mm. What is interesting is that in the context of employees seen as human resources and therefore valued more and seen within the capitalist framework, even there with AI coming in, that value of that work is also being devalued, right? And
Exactly.
we are living
So
now in times where, I'm linking it. Tell me if it's a correct or an incorrect linkage, but Mr. Narayan Murthy's 70 to 72-hour work week, L&T chairman SN Subramaniam's
right.
90 hours work week. This is all headed there, isn't it? So it's not what I'm trying to say is that employees or human resources who see themselves as in a better space in terms of bargaining or negotiating compared to workers and definitely gig workers may not be as secure anymore.
Absolutely. I think, that's what, no, see, there is no, that's what, when it comes to devaluing
Hmm,
human input, businesses are very quick.
hmm,
But when it comes to revaluing human input,
hmm.
they are very slow, right?
Yeah,
So that's exactly the point, that what was considered to be high value human input, now you will get rid of easily without you will lay off people without a second thought. But the same revaluing that is happening of things that were seen of as being low skill and low end, when they become more important, you're not revaluing them.
hmm.
So in an AI driven world, the most valuable professions may well be that of plumbers and carpenters,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
It may well be, right?
yeah.
Willy nilly, their input will have to be revalued.
Hmm,
But because of the system in which today labor resides in India,
hmm,
where the power equation is what it is,
hmm,
had that not been the case, labor would have been demanding. Had India been a labor scarce country, or
hmm,
had not had this kind of abundance of labor,
hmm.
certainly there would have been a reevaluation that would have taken place. Today it has not taken place because of the fact that we are the country that we are.
I want to go back to one of Deepinder Goyal's posts because I think it was a lot of his reactions that helped enlarge this debate. Perhaps not to his benefit, but definitely brought in a lot of real thinking to the fore on both sides. And there was one thing he said, and that really bothered me, which is that the platform guys have visibilized, I mean those are not his words, but that labor and working class people were invisible to the consuming class, namely the better off people. What platforms have done have actually made them visible and therefore brought our guilt face to face. I mean, I thought that is where he completely lost the plot, if I can say that as directly. Actually, I can say that this is no longer CNBC, right? It's my channel, so I can say this because I really think he lost the plot there. And I have to give you this anecdote, Santosh. It was Diwali, and a gig worker, an Amazon delivery boy, came into the building and went to flat saying, Diwali, we've come to say hello and happy Diwali, and a bakshish, which is traditional in India. We had these relationships. Those relationships have gone. You know what happened? Forget bakshish. He was taken, marched out of the building by security, and security was given a dressing down by residents because, like, how did he come into the building to ask for bakshish? How did he come in without a delivery to make? So
Yeah.
I mean, what is he talking about? What is he smoking? Or am I being extremely harsh in my reaction to this particular comment or observation that he put out?
No, I think it's reasonable to ask that, because I think, I think it requires, I think, a certain amount of tone deafness, and perhaps just, to a certain extent, blindness, to argue that. Because come on, in India, I mean, come on, I mean, to say that, poverty is not visible, poverty is not, and even to argue, even if you were to nuance that argument and say, okay, let's not, here somebody's coming into your home all the time, and you're seeing their state, and if it is raining and they were wet and they come in and still do the delivery, there is a certain, you are forced to regard them and
Hmm.
their condition, perhaps more, sort of sympathetically. Even that argument to me is, is a really, really, I mean, you walk anywhere in India, there are homeless people on the street. There is, I mean, unless, you have completely kind of stopped noticing those people. And
Hmm.
the argument is that we've stopped noticing those people, and willy-nilly we notice gig workers.
Hmm.
To me, that it really is, and because it is self-serving, it makes it
Yeah,
worse, right? It is a
self-serving.
self-serving, and
Yeah.
I think, from, if I just step back and look at it from a,
Hmm.
a lens of a brand or a image kind of a perspective,
Yeah.
I think one of the problems that comes with founders who become very successful
Hmm.
is that they tend to believe that they have answers to everything.
Hmm.
And it becomes very, there is a godlike
Yeah.
complex that
Yeah.
can get developed. And I'm not necessarily saying that is true for specific individuals, but I
No,
think as a
but I
phenomenon,
understand.
the idea that, because I think there is a certain, arrogance in the fact that you believe you can reshape the entire narrative
Hmm.
through the strength of your words,
Hmm.
right? To come in and to try and reframe this debate, and to have the confidence to believe that, because you are successful, and because, you are followed a lot on social media, you will be able to reframe this narrative, and people who have held positions that are the opposite will suddenly turn around and say, oh yes, you're right, that's really what is at work.
Hmm.
That requires a particular kind of self belief, which
Yeah.
I think, you have perhaps to earn billions to acquire.
A final thought on the kind of arguments that ranged on both sides, and this whole, the startup system, don't criticize it, it is pushing, it is creating employment, it is giving India a profile and all of that. You want to leave us with a thought on those arguments that were being made
No, I look.
largely by startup founders and by investors?
No, I think it is true that, there is something, there is a lot of energy that comes
Sure.
into the economy because of the startup founders,
Yeah.
and particularly this platform also. I think they provide utility, they provide, and there are a bunch of people for whom, this is the best option for making, some form of a livelihood.
Yeah.
So I think it would be wrong, it would be churlish not to acknowledge that. I think that is true.
Fair
At the
enough.
same time, the question of what is appropriate value,
Hmm.
I think is a legitimate question, and it's a question that needs to be answered. And what I, in a way, like about this whole debate is the fact that it was actually an act of overconfidence that has led to, I
Yeah.
think, a debate. What was seen to be a way of actually trying to force the narrative in a certain direction has not worked, and the
Yeah.
opposite seems to have be happening. I think they may have contained the fallout of that,
Yeah.
but that time will tell.
Time will tell. And I think I really appreciate Deepinder Goyal's posts, because I think it allowed us to, I think he was candid in what he thought and he expressed it, and it allowed us therefore to argue it. And on this show, keep talking is the mantra, is the name, right? So keep talking, and thank you, Santosh, for enabling us to do that.
My pleasure, as always, Anuradha.
Thank you.